Once again, good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. As always, I am Zak, the Corruption Detector, and this is another edition of Red Pill News. I hope you are having a lovely day. If you didn't get a chance to check out Occam's Razor earlier today at 1:30, you can still watch the replay, but I have many interesting stories to tell you about today. First of all, we're going to be taking a look at the brand new posts that have just dropped in the last couple of minutes, and I have a bit of a retraction correction from yesterday. I had a bad day. Then we're going to be talking about specifically the training of these fighters that we see on the streets of our country today, the ones driving the rioting and the looting and the destruction we talked about in yesterday's video. Then we have a story about how Americans have been shown the exact nature of what these people are all about. Sometimes you can't just tell people, you have to show them. Then we're going to be looking at a bit of Christopher Wray's testimony on this group this morning from the Senate Homeland Security Committee. And we have a story about AG Barr and what he's hoping to do with these protesters and the leaders that are driving all of this destruction. Then we have some information coming out about General Flynn's case. The United States government has added a national security attorney to the case. I believe they are going to be representing the government. And finally, Andy No is the latest journalist on Twitter being attacked by Uranon Central, the famous Clownonymous account that our favorite Anon pointed out as probably being activated by employees of Twitter themselves. Anonymous is supposed to be a group that's for justice and transparency, and by shutting down reporters doing accurate reporting on the ground in places like Portland, that's not a way to get there. Alright guys, we're going to go over all this and more, so please sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. After 20 years old, your body will naturally decrease its collagen production by 12% each passing decade. This decrease in collagen is a leading reason why the skin appears thinner and more wrinkled as we get older. It's essential for skin, bones, and more. And the way to keep our skin looking healthy and youthful is by consuming 5 different types of collagen. No single source provides you with all the different types of collagen your body needs until now. Ageless Multi-Collagen gives you those 5 types of collagen you need from 4 premium sources in one complete protein mix. You'll enjoy powerful support for your skin, hair, nails, joints, bones, digestive system, and muscles with results you can see and feel in just a few short weeks. As an added bonus, Ageless Multi-Collagen is non-GMO and there's 0 artificial flavors, colors, preservatives, sweeteners, gluten, or antibiotics. Get your own bag of Ageless Multi-Collagen for 51% off plus free shipping by going to healthwithredpill.com or click the link in the description or pinned comment below. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. Alright guys, thanks for sticking around. First of all, today we have to talk about these brand new posts that just came out. First and foremost, yesterday when I was doing my video, I was very tired, I was very frustrated, I had a lot of things happening with my computer that stopped me from making the video in the way that I wanted. And the very end of these posts was this Disney clock. I said it was 2 p.m. It's not 2 p.m. It's at 10:10. Okay, I'm so sorry. I felt so stupid after I published the video and realized. Now, everybody gave me a pass in the comments, and I really appreciate it. But this is 10:10. Now, what this initially or immediately makes me think about is the concept of an October surprise. October is generally the month before an election when some big information is dropped, and they call it an October surprise because it surprises everyone, and it's right before they have to go and cast their ballots. I've said numerous times, Americans, unfortunately, and I guess the world over, people everywhere have a notoriously short attention span now, and that reason, by and large, is due to the advent of social media, mobile devices, the fact that people are constantly flicking. They're always looking for notifications. They're always looking for that next dopamine spike where they, get that pleasure center response because they see a like or they see a share. They see themselves being validated because of what social media has done to our brains. So, this says 10:10. That leads me to believe October 10th. That could be totally wrong. It could just be the fact that this is a Disney clock, like I said yesterday, pointing to the fact that Disney has some big surprises coming up. Ooh, and look at that, live posts coming through as I'm on the air. Now, the next post is an article from the Daily Sabah. And our favorite Anon says, sometimes non-domestic sources of information provide a more accurate report. Now, this is in regards to that report that Methods and I discussed the other day on Occam's Razor, how members of the far-left anarchist group that is besieging our cities right now had begun to train with PPK and YPK groups in the Middle East, in Syria, and in Turkey. These are the Kurd groups and the ones who are fighting against the Assad regime and against the Turkish regime there as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at that reporting, because it actually gives us an accurate look at what is going on. All right, so it is entitled YPG, and PKK recruited foreign fighters from anti-Fa groups in Western countries, report says. Now, this recent report was entitled Foreign Terrorist Fighters in PKK and YPG in Syria. Violent extremism backfires. Now, what this report reveals is the relationship between those two groups, YPG and PKK, they're terror groups in Syria, and this anti-Fa movement that we have here in the United States and in many other Western countries. And it includes a warning about the possible negative consequences of turning a blind eye to these extremist groups' activities. I argue this is what's already happened here in the United States, certainly with Jerry Nadler saying that it's a myth, they don't exist. And luckily, we had Christopher Wray testifying today before the Senate Homeland Security Committee. He said it is a real group, and he let us know that they truly are paying attention. But too many people have just turned a blind eye and decided that this is nothing to pay attention to. I urge you, look around at the streets of these major metropolitan areas and Democrat-controlled cities and states. You can clearly see that they are a clear and present danger to our very existence and way of life. Now, the report itself was written by two academics, Murat Tanas and Amat Demirden, and it was published by the Turkish National Police Academy. It said that the PKK terror group's affiliates in Syria had recruited many Western individuals from far-right and far-left organizations, including these anti-Fa groups operating in European countries, US, Canada, and Australia. Now, when the U.S. president announced that Antifa would be designated a terror organization, many turned their eyes to the controversial movement, and although Antifa and some of its members' criminal acts terrorizing their societies may be a new phenomenon for many, they remain well known to those who have been monitoring the current development related to terror in the Middle East. First, having a far-left ideology, the PKK has easily penetrated into various leftist movements in Western countries through its established transnational networks. Second, the PKK and YPG has also reinforced its units through far-right extremist foreigners and cooperated with far-right armed groups. Basically, PKK and YPG don't care where it's coming from. Anytime they can get support, they're going to go for it. And unfortunately, it's coming from the far left and the far right. Now, the authors of the report say that both the glorification of the YPG and PKK in the Western media and international actors in action against the terror group have reinforced this flow of foreign fighters and terrorists in the region. Now, thinking back to all of those posts we had the other day showing so many different pictures of these guys standing there holding that flag, and oftentimes next to the ISIS flag as well. Another important point of the report shows that terror groups attempt to justify their terror attacks by creating a narrative that portrays them as freedom fighters. Think the Syrian rebels, anti-fascist, anti-authoritarian, or anti-communist, claiming to bring about justice by the way of terror. Anti-Fa obviously being the anti-fascist, anti-authoritarians, but they themselves are the real fascists and authoritarians. Now, the report continues and emphasizes the fact that when the flow of foreign terror fighters in YPG and PKK in Syria was reversed, fighters returned to their home countries. The risk they posed became more evident. And that's what happened here in the United States. We had a whole slew of them coming back in April. And now, what do we have? Terror in the streets. Regardless of their ideology or the groups they join, they can plan, direct, or conduct terror attacks, create new terror organizations, and radicalize and recruit new terrorists. YPG returnees pose an additional danger due to the fact that security institutions of certain Western governments have paid no attention to far-left and far-right extremists associated with the YPG, and therefore their numbers, fighting experience, as well as the crimes they have committed in the war zone, they all remain mostly unknown and unmonitored. Then the report continues to talk about the narratives that are being spun surrounding these groups. They say the dissemination and promotion of these narratives are paramount in order to attract sympathizers for the terror groups around the world. Thus, public and private institutions working in the field must be cautious not to inadvertently facilitate these narratives, as has been observed in the case of Antifa and the YPG on the pretext of fighting Daesh. flesh. As it can be observed in the case of Antifa and far-right terror groups working with the YPG in Syria and Iraq, that rival terror groups can build unexpected allegiances and exploit the same tragic public event to promote their narratives, like the death of George Floyd. Now, in the more than 40 years that the PKK has been waging their terror campaign against Turkey, and they have been listed as a terror group by Turkey, the United States, and the European Union, they've been responsible for the deaths of 40,000 people, including women, children, and infants, and the YPG is the PPK's Syrian offshoot. So as you can see, when you take an objective look at what is happening, we had people, American citizens, who are part of these anti-fascist groups, traveling to Syria, traveling to Turkey, learning to fight with these people, and then coming home to America, and they are putting the things they've learned into action here on the streets. It makes you wonder about that guy in Portland, if he himself had been one of those people who went and fought with these guys before he was taken down by the federal authorities. He had absolutely no compunction about just walking up to an unarmed patriot on the street and putting him down. This is certainly not the last time that it's going to happen, and you can see from all of the tactics of these people, they are well armed and they are militarized. They learned it somewhere, and they learned it with these guys. Now, moving on to post 4732, we go to post 4385, which contains another post that was put out on the 31st of May. And we were told that the mapping of that anti-fascist group started a long time ago. And then post 4385 contained an article from Fox News talking about the riots and how they started. And then it goes on to an article from Fox News, which discusses the arrests which are coming for the leaders of this anti-fascist group and also the foot soldiers on the ground. It said arrests among its highest ranks may be imminent, and intelligence sources pointed out that indictments have been building for some time, and a close examination of funding revenues remains under the microscope. While Antifa operates as something of a leaderless militant wing, sources closely engaged in the matter said that there are identifiable top brass driving and inciting criminal activity. Now, one of the viewers on Occam's Razor earlier today said that a federal case typically takes 3 to 5 years to build and bring to court. So if this mapping started a long time ago, say when President Trump came into office, or even before that, it would have to have been that long for them to get this case together and bring it. We're almost 4 years into President Trump's first administration, and that lines up perfectly with that 3 to 5 year time span. Now, going on to post 4733, we have a repost of 1585, where we were told that organized riots were being planned. Organized riots being planned. Wow, isn't it incredible that back on the 21st of June in 2018, before any of this started popping off, we had confirmation from our favorite Anon letting us know that this was going to happen. And in response to the Anon up here that says very reassuring, which is in regards to these last two posts, our favorite Anon says this should be also. Obviously, they have been watching, they have been cataloging, they have been gathering evidence, and they have just been waiting for the time to strike. The indictments are there, you guys. We've got several 100,000 indictments just sitting there, waiting to be put out into the world. The full post says, "We stand, we fight together. Organized riots being planned, countermeasures in place. Resistance far smaller than portrayed by the mainstream media. Attacks will intensify. You collectively are a massive threat. Censorship applied to scale down impact and reach. It's failing. Trust yourself. Public awakening." Sometimes you can't tell people, you have to show them. I would say that the majority of Americans understand at this point. They have been shown what life would look like under Democrat leadership, under the far-left, anarchistic, anti-fascist leadership that these people espouse. Now, I'm not saying I want a fascist in office. We don't have a fascist in office. But if we had somebody like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden come into the office of the presidency, they would trample all over the Constitution, and we would lose more rights than they believe they would be protected. All right, so let's move on to a story about the American public and how they have been shown. Well, after over 3 months of near constant rioting in certain areas in the country, it has proven to be a bad look for Democrats. They thought they would make Donald Trump look weak by starting all of this destruction in various cities throughout the United States, but unfortunately, all it's done is push a majority of likely voters to fear the current lawlessness. They actually want new laws to protect the police, and that includes 84% of black voters, a majority of black voters. Now, for months, Democrats, leftists, the the Anti-Fa and Black Lives Matter mobs have been terrorizing American cities. BLM, the activist group behind the riots, has caused over $1 billion in destruction, and that's actually not quite accurate because yesterday I showed that in that first week and a half to 2 weeks, they caused about $2 billion in destruction. And as a result, Americans are terrified that their community could be next. So it should really not be much of a surprise that a majority of likely voters want Blue Lives Matter laws to protect police in America. They don't want what happened in Los Angeles the other day to be an everyday occurrence. So here's the numbers. 68% of voters are concerned that deadly attacks on the police will lead to a shortage of police officers, and 84% of black voters are concerned that a shortage of police officers may hurt their communities, and in fact it will. And this is a perfect explanation for President Trump's inroads with African American voters, so much more than he had previously. Now, these polls are from Rasmussen. Rasmussen is probably the only legitimate polling outfit that I really put any trust in. They say most voters believe there is a war on police in America today. Yes, there is. And they want to make attacks on cops punishable as a hate crime, as they should. Black voters worry most that these attacks will make their communities less safe. The latest Rasmussen Reports national telephone and online survey finds that 59% of likely U.S. voters think there is a war on police. That's up from 43% 2 years ago and up from a previous high of 58% in 2015. Only 29% of voters disagree, while 12% are still undecided. 59% also support the adoption of a Blue Lives Matter law in their state, which would make it a hate crime for people to attack police officers, and it would also increase the penalties for such attacks. That is unchanged from 2016, when Louisiana became the first of more than a dozen states to adopt a law that did that. Only 25% of voters oppose a Blue Lives Matter law where they live, and 16% of those voters are unsure. 68% of those voters are concerned that deadly attacks on the police will lead to a shortage of officers and reduce public safety where they live, with 44% who are very concerned. 30% don't share that concern, but that includes only 14% who are not at all concerned. 63% of white voters are bigger supporters of Blue Lives Matter than black voters. They are at 52%, and other minorities are at 49%. But 84% of those black voters are a lot more concerned than whites, where 66% of them and 70% of other minorities are concerned about a potential shortage of police officers in their community. Now, let's just think about this logically. You've had an exodus of police officers in these major metropolitan areas where all of the unrest and rioting has kicked off. People have left the job, they have fired people, they have defunded police officers. Now, what does that mean? Less police in the inner city. Where do more minorities live? Unfortunately, they live in the inner city. They live in major metropolitan areas. Now, in areas where it is a suburban community, you still have a mixture of minority and Caucasian voters, but those communities are not voting to defund the police. For some reason, it's only in these major metropolitan areas. It certainly looks to me like the local governments there are attempting to create a situation where it is unsafe for the constituents of their communities. I mean, look at Chicago. Chicago is a war zone. Look at Minneapolis. Right here in Minneapolis back in June, the protesters burned down the 3rd precinct. Anytime you have a reduction in police, you have an increase in crime and a reduction in public safety. It is an incontrovertible fact. I totally agree with these people who think that this is a bad idea. And I think that these numbers should show the Democrats that they are riding the wrong horse. You do not want a reduction in public safety. You do not want a reduction in police. And you certainly do not want to defund your police departments. And just as a sad, stark reminder of what happens when you decide to defund your police department, right here in Minneapolis, a 17-year-old staffer for the GOP challenger of Ilhan Omar was gunned down in North Minneapolis. He was the outreach coordinator for Lacey's campaign. The person running against Ilhan Omar is Republican Lacey Johnson. He was killed Monday outside of a gas station. He was left laying face down in the parking lot. It is a tragic, tragic thing. And just looking back in 2019 in Minneapolis, there were 48 homicides throughout the entire year. But this man, young Andre Conley, was the 59th homicide victim this year. Murder is way up in Minneapolis, and I would say that the response to the police has a large part to do with that. Now, in addition to being the 59th homicide victim this year, he was also the 9th homicide victim under 18 years old. An eyewitness said that Conley was murdered when a green truck pulled up and started shooting. The 2 GOP staffers were hit in the shooting, so somebody else was hit as well. Now, a witness ran over to try to give him aid, but a woman told him not to move the body, and he laid on the pavement as people milled around. But thank God, a suspect has been arrested. He was taken into custody after a high-speed pursuit, according to the Minneapolis PD. Officers attempted to pull him over, probably recognizing that green truck, but then he fled, leading to the car chase, which ended in the suspect crashing his vehicle. Now, I certainly am not telling you guys this story to gloat. This is, as I stated, a stark reminder of what happens when you get rid of police in your communities. And I believe his death was completely avoidable. His blood is on the hands of the Minneapolis City Council and the local leaders who decided to defund the police, and also on the hands of the people organizing this unrest. Now, with regard to the people engaging in the lawlessness and unrest in various cities in the Pacific Northwest and across the Midwest, A.G. Barr was speaking with federal prosecutors. You know, they talk, they want to decide what they're going to do with this situation. And apparently, he urged the federal prosecutors to charge the rioters themselves with sedition and to charge the mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkan, with criminal charges because, let's face it, she allowed the anarchists to establish the CHOP or the CHAZ or whatever it was that they ended up with as their name. Now, Attorney General Barr not only told federal prosecutors to charge violent rioters with sedition, he also asked them to explore whether they could bring criminal charges against Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan for allowing the anti-fascist rioters to establish a police-free zone dubbed CHOP and CHAZ, where several people lost their lives. He made these statements during a conference call just last week with federal prosecutors, and this is being reported by the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. If you ask me, charging these people with sedition is exactly what we need to do, and yes, we also need to charge Mayor Jenny Durkan, who called this the summer of love before several people were killed in the midst of all of the chaos. Yes, she needs to be charged criminally. Think about all the damage to businesses and personal property. Think about the loss of lives. Think about the various other crimes that went unreported because there were no police to come in there and do their job. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, people familiar with the conference call said Barr encouraged the prosecutors to seek a number of federal charges, including the rarely used sedition law, even when state charges would apply. So maybe they're looking for some kind of double jeopardy here. Now, according to Law and Crime, the seditious conspiracy statute is a means of punishing those who conspire to violently overthrow or who oppose by force the authority of the U.S. government or who by force conspire to seize federal property. That's exactly what they did. Think about how long they laid siege to the federal courthouse, trying to set it on fire, breaking windows. They wanted access. They wanted to take it over. Now, this sedition charge would be for federal crimes. Obviously, there are other state charges that these people are completely guilty of. It's just a matter of getting the states and the local areas to bring charges against them. And if they are Democrat-run areas with attorneys that were put into office by people like, say, George Soros, it might be unlikely that state charges are going to get filed. Now, charges against Jenny Durkan, that's right, she called it the summer of love. She said that the police-free zone was part of a street carnival to celebrate, and President Trump warned Durkan and Governor Jay Inslee he would act if they did not secure the city from the anarchists who had taken over about 6 square blocks. Durkan responded to Trump with childish taunts, and Durkan's summer of love turned into a summer of murder. 2 black kids were murdered inside the CHOP CHAZ within 1 week, and the Seattle Department of Transportation crews in late June finally removed those barricades from the CHOP zone with heavy machinery after 2 confirmed murders in the police-free zone. The mayor of Seattle should, without a doubt, be charged for allowing these militants to take over that area of Seattle, and I believe that every single person who lost property or their business should be paid restitution. Jenny Durkan needs to get put out of office, and I believe that she does have a contender who's coming up in the next election. Now, as time wears on and the federal government gives us a little bit more inside information as to how they are approaching this problem, it becomes more and more likely that we are going to see the charges that we've been hoping for. We've got Attorney General Bill Barr talking about sedition and with charging the mayors of these cities where these actions took place. And today, Christopher Wray was testifying before the Senate Homeland Security Committee, and he admitted under oath that Antifa is a real thing and that the FBI has cases against people that they are identifying with this movement. Now, he appeared before the Senate Homeland Security hearing today stating Antifa is a real thing. The FBI has cases against people identifying with the movement. He made it clear it's not made up, as Jerry Nadler said it was. It's not a right-wing conspiracy theory, and that the FBI has cases connected to it. That means ongoing investigations. That means that people will be brought to justice, and hopefully very, very soon. I would like to see that before the election. Maybe that's the October surprise. Now, in speaking about the organization, he did talk about the fact that it's not an organization per se, as there is no structured leadership. It's more of a movement, and there are suspects who claim to be a part of it, and I would say that that is a pretty fair estimation. He said Antifa is a real thing. It's not a group or an organization. It's a movement or an ideology, maybe one way of thinking about it. And we have quite a number, and I've said this quite consistently since my first time appearing before this committee. We have any number of properly predicated investigations in what we would describe as violent anarchist extremists, and some of those individuals self-identify with Anti-Fa. So Ray's words were in response to Representative Debbie Lesko, who claimed that prominent Democrats have called Antifa a fantasy, and they have. In July, we had Jerry Nadler in that infamous Fleckus Talks clip where he said that the idea of Antifa violence in Portland is a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C. Well, Jerry Nadler, I urge you to take a trip to Minneapolis, to Seattle, to Portland, and to step out of your limo at night in the midst of all of this chaos that you have allowed to continue on the streets of American cities. So that is basically the thrust of it. Christopher Wray labeled them as a group, as a dangerous group, and as a group that has active investigations into its membership right now. Now think back to the post from our favorite Anon at the beginning of the show. The mapping of this group happened a long time ago. Charges are coming. They know who the leaders are, and they know where the money is coming from. All right, and in an update to the Michael Flynn case, the DOJ has added a U.S. national security attorney to the prosecution team for as yet unknown reasons. Now, for anyone looking at this case from an outsider's point of view, it is pretty clear that it is a grotesque miscarriage of justice. Michael Flynn knew where the bodies were buried. He did not agree with the decisions the Obama administration was making, and then as an incoming member of the Trump team, there was no possible way they could allow him to carry into another administration. He knew where the bodies were buried. He would have taken down all of the systems they had been working on for the last 8 years and longer. And it was necessary to bury General Flynn under false charges brought by holdovers from the Obama administration. Now, Sarah Carter reported on September 4th that the Department of Justice decision to drop the case has not been handled by Judge Sullivan. In fact, he has continued it on. The appeals court pushed it back to Judge Sullivan, essentially telling him to go ahead and take care of it, since the Department of Justice does not want to prosecute him anymore. Now, he has set a hearing, but it's for the absolute last day that he could, and it is in late September. The Flynn case is at the very heart of the Obama administration's attempt to set up and destroy President Trump and have him removed from office. Flynn had to be stopped because he was privy to the most alarming aspects of the criminal organization under the Obama administration. Now, in this latest move, U.S. National Security Attorney Ken Cole has just been assigned to the case, and some are theorizing that Cole has been assigned to protect the government's actions in the case and any sealed information in the case from falling into the hands of the corrupt judges in the case. Unfortunately, we're just going to have to wait until that hearing comes at the end of September, but I pray that General Flynn's case is over soon, because he definitely deserves to be restored and to be given a position inside this administration. And finally, Andy Ngo, one of the best reporters on the ground in Portland, is being targeted by the people who call themselves anonymous. This is the official anonymous account. It's called to ban him for posting public records, something journalists do on a daily basis. And here we have a tweet from Anonymous asking Twitter safety to ban Andy Ngo for posting those public records, even though, again, he's a journalist and that's what journalists do. I just want to remind everybody that this is the Anonymous account that is supposedly being run by Twitter employees themselves. This is definitely somebody I think you guys should go ahead and block, because what they do is go and look for Patriot accounts who are doing things that they could get banned for, and they reach out to Twitter and they get it taken care of, and then people lose their entire timeline. All right, and as I was finishing the video, a couple of more posts came up. Now, post 4734, this gives us a bit of information to follow and a way to move forward. Our favorite Anon says, focus on content, information, research for yourself. Gatekeeper, noun, don't be gatekeepers. A person that controls access as to information, often acting as an arbiter of quality or legitimacy. We need to think for ourselves. An open internet allows innovators to bypass traditional gatekeepers and promote their work on its own merit. The cream will rise to the top and the chaff will fall from the wheat. A guardian, monitor, deploy camouflage. This is very important. Drop all references regarding the 17th letter of the alphabet, 17 Anon, etc. This way you can avoid ban, termination, and the censorship install. Algos, sniffer, bypass. We can bypass the algorithms and the sniffers if we drop that 17 stuff from our profiles and from our tweets. Keep charging, Midnight Riders. Revere's Midnight Ride. Delivery of free information. Bypass controlled media narrative. The media for too many years has been the gatekeepers. We should not fall into the trap of becoming gatekeepers ourselves. When you disagree with somebody, there's no reason to get into an argument or a fight about it. People should be able to have a civilized conversation and present their arguments based on the evidence they have provided on their own merits. It doesn't need to devolve into a shouting match or a situation where people end up getting so upset that they go their own separate ways, stomping off into the sunset. As long as we're focusing on the quality of our information, doing good research, bringing facts to the table, this shouldn't be a problem in the near future. But the most important thing, drop all the 17 references from your profiles. We need to find another way to identify each other. Then 4735, and Anon says, if somebody comes to accept a truth or swallow a red pill without knowing it was associated with our favorite Anon, then they do so unpolluted by media bias regarding that Anon status. Bypass prejudice makes sense. That's what Anon was all about, right? Nobody cares about ranks or names or upvotes or e-stardom. The content of your post should speak for itself, ideas. And this is why I always say we are all on the same playing field. Each and every one of us is just as important as the next. And I think that every time our favorite Anon posts something from a random account who is just putting out good information, it drives that point home. This is not about fame. This is not about fortune. This is about saving our country. And finally, post 4736, our favorite Anon says rig for red. Rig for red, once again, is terminology used in submarines where all of the lights are turned red. They are basically going dark. It allows them to submerge and remain undetected. This is an analogy for us and how we need to move forward. We need to be on the down low, and we need to be very careful with everything we do. I'm starting to wonder if maybe there's no need to cover these posts anymore, and I simply need to bring you guys information. Why don't you let me know in the comments below without saying the 17th letter of the alphabet? All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. I want to thank everyone for joining me. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am Zak the Corruption Detector, and this was another edition of Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. Hey guys, one more thing. I just want to thank everyone for watching today. If you have not subscribed yet, I urge you to please consider subscribing. There will be a couple of videos that pop up if you want to continue to watch. There's also some ways in the description of this video that you can follow me on other platforms. Please consider doing that as well. And if you want to support the program directly, there are means to do that below as well. Thank you all for your support over the last couple of years. Consider liking and sharing this video and help me get the real news to people who don't yet know they've been lied to.